Sexual abuse is defined as any time a younger or vulnerable person is used by an older person or a more powerful child for sexual gratification. Sexual abuse can be contact or non-contact. Contact sexual abuse involves being touched in sexual areas, being forced to touch another individual's sexual areas, being held in a sexual way, or being anally or vaginally penetrated. Non-contact sexual abuse is defined as any time someone is shown sexual video, being flashed or exposed to sexual body parts, being forced to listen to sexual talk, being forced to pose for a seductive photo, being forced to look at someone else's sexual body parts. Practical applications. How can you teach your child to protect themselves from sexual abuse?
It would be, one way would be to say, if someone touches you here, like in these parts, that's not right, and you have to remove yourself from that immediately.
And tell me about it. Yeah. Tell me as your parent about it. How can you ensure that children do not sexually abuse one another? I think basically the same thing, where don't let your sibling touch you here, and if they do, just let me know. I think, right? Yeah. Child abuse and neglect can have mild to severe long-term consequences. Insights from the article that is mentioned here regarding abuse towards children and its effects on children are below. The damage done to each child is different because of many factors: the child's age and developmental status when the maltreatment occurred, the type of abuse, the frequency of abuse, the duration of abuse, the severity of abuse, the specific relationship between the child and the perpetrator, such as a parent, stranger, sibling, etc. The first effect it has is on their psychological development and emotional well-being. Diminished executive functioning and cognitive skills occur. Stunted brain development as a result of maltreatment often causes impairments to the brain's executive functions, such as working memory, self-control, and cognitive flexibility, i.e., the ability to look, consider different perspectives. Children who are maltreated are also at risk of experiencing difficulty learning and paying attention. Poor mental and emotional health is another cause. Children who experience maltreatment are at greater risk factor for depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric disorders throughout adulthood. Studies have found that adults with a history of adverse childhood experiences had a higher instances of suicide attempts than those who did not experience adverse childhood experiences. Adults that struggle with major depression, specifically those abused as children, had poor response outcome to antidepressant treatment, especially if the maltreatment took place when they were 7 years or younger. Attachment and social difficulties. Infants in foster care who have been maltreated are found to usually develop attachment disorders. Attachment disorders usually negatively affect a child's ability to form positive peer social and romantic relationships in their lifetime. Children who undergo abuse or neglect are also more likely to develop antisocial tendencies as they become adults. Post-traumatic stress. Children who experience abuse or neglect often develop post-traumatic stress disorder, which is characterized by symptoms such as continuous re-experiencing of traumatic events, avoiding people, places, and events that remind them of their maltreatment, feelings of fear, horror, anger, guilt, or shame, startling easily, and exhibiting hypervigilance, irritability, or other types of mood swings. This PTSD in children usually leads to depression, suicidal behavior, substance use, and defiant behaviors. This can affect their ability to do well in school and develop important relationships. Abuse or neglect usually stunts the physical development of a child's brain. This leads to psychological problems such as low self-esteem. This may also lead to high-risk behaviors such as substance use. A list of the types of brain development that children will suffer abuse are at risk for are underdevelopment of the amygdala, which aids in processing emotions, underdevelopment of the hippocampus, which aids in learning and memory, underdevelopment of the orbitofrontal cortex, which is responsible for reinforcement-based decision-making and emotional regulation, underdevelopment of the cerebellum, which coordinates motor behavior and executive functioning, underdevelopment of the corpus callosum, which is responsible for left brain, right brain communication and other processes, for example, arousal, emotion, and higher cognitive abilities. So higher thinking, like smart, like, like the kind of thinking you need to go into college and stuff. Effects of child abuse on physical well-being. The effects are direct physical injuries are common of abuse and neglect. For example, bruises from being hit, death/decrease in quality of life from not being given medical care, physical damage from not being given nutrition from food, etc. These physical issues often have a lifelong impact and may even have an intergenerational impact. A list of specific health consequences that children who suffer abuse are at risk for: diabetes, lung disease, malnutrition, vision problems, functional limitations, heart attacks, arthritis, back problems, high blood pressure, brain damage, migraine headaches, chronic bronchitis, emphysema, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, cancer, stroke, bowel disease, chronic fatigue syndrome. The certain types of maltreatment a child goes through can increase their risk for certain physical health conditions. Children who experience neglect are at an increased risk for diabetes, poor lung functioning, vision problems, and oral health problems. Children who are physically abused are at a higher risk for diabetes and malnutrition. Children who are victims of sexual abuse are more likely to contract hepatitis C and HIV. Effects of abuse on behavior. Unhealthy sexual practices. Studies provide evidence that abuse or neglected children are more likely to participate in sexual risk-taking than in adolescence. And during adolescence, they're more likely to have a higher number of sexual partners and are more likely to engage in transactional sex, i.e. sex exchange for money, gifts, or other material support. This greatly increases their chance of acquiring a sexually transmitted disease. Juvenile delinquency and adult criminality. Several studies have proven that there is a correlation between child maltreatment and juvenile delinquency and adult criminality. According to research which was founded by the National Institute of Justice within the U.S. Department of Justice, it was discovered that children who undergo maltreatment in the form of physical and emotional abuse are more likely to develop antisocial behaviors and build relationships with antisocial people. There is also a difference between girls and boys in the way that child maltreatment influences potential delinquent behavior. In this study, it was discovered that the girls tended to demonstrate internalizing behaviors such as depression, social withdrawal, and anxiety, whereas boys tended to demonstrate externalizing behaviors such as bullying, aggression, and hostility. Both of these male and female behaviors eventually led to future adult criminal behavior. Alcohol and drug use. Adults who have been maltreated as children are at a much higher risk of substance use disorders than adults who have not been maltreated. Future perpetration of maltreatment. Children who have been abused or neglected are more likely to abuse or neglect their own children than children who had emotionally healthy upbringings. This child maltreatment occurs because children are convinced early on that abuse or neglect is the correct way to parent. Is this damage permanent? Fortunately, there is evidence that proves that children's brains may be able to recover with the help of right intervention. As we stated prior, development is lifelong. Practical applications. Research has shown that there are things you can do as a parent to prevent your child from being abused by you and by others. Now, to practice applying the following information, answer each question below each point.